G'day and welcome back to Motivation Inc., where we talk about money, metals, and medallions. And today we're looking at a three-part series by the Royal Australian Mint of treasured Australian writers. And coincidentally, they're all done in my favourite coin, the 50-cent decimal piece. And these are not intended for circulation collections. The three writers are Banjo Patterson, Henry Lawson, and Dorothea McKellar. And today we're looking at Banjo Patterson. So Andrew Barton Patterson, or Banjo Patterson as he became known, was born in 1864 and died in 1941, and he was one of the greatest writers of the Australian colonial period. In the 1880s and 1890s, Australia was still a collection of self-governing British colonies, and of course we became a nation of our own in 1901, but we were searching for our own national identity, and we really identified with heroics and hardness and people overcoming the bush and the outback, and so that's still a large part of our identity, even though 95+% of us live in cities. We identify with the bush. So let's look at Banjo Patterson. He wrote some of our most quintessential famous Australian poems, and I haven't read them all in many years, in school in fact, and that's 40+ years ago. So I'm going to make a promise to you all that I will reread these. So the first one, Clancy of the Overflow. And apparently, the card says, it was inspired by a letter the poet received which appeared to have been written with a thumbnail dipped in tar. From this evocative source material, he created the classic ode to the rugged bushman and the wild beauty of the Australian outback. And you can see the beautiful gold gilded kind of coin, the horseman on the back of the coin at the top there, mustering cattle. And underneath you can see Patterson working in his office with the tram, which in the town or city, I'm presuming that's Melbourne because that's the only place I know that had trams in those days. Probably elsewhere, who knows. And on the back, the Queen, 2020, so that's a Jodie Clark effigy of the Queen. Anyway, that celebrates the rugged Australian bushman, which we all identify with here in Australia. And Clancy is mentioned in a later poem, which we'll get to, The Man from Snowy River. Let's have a look at the next one, Waltzing Matilda. So this was written when he was visiting friends at Dagworth Station in Queensland in 1895, and legend has it he fit the words to the Scottish tune, The Bonnie Woods of Craigielee. Now, the story is of a swagman, which is an itinerant worker who carried their possessions on a swag on their back with a billy tin or pot to cook their food in. You can see him camped by a billabong. A billabong is a stagnant pond of water left by as the river changes directions. And the tree is a coolabah tree. So once a jolly swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree. And he actually was on somebody else's property, found a stray sheep, killed it for dinner, and then the troopers, the mounted troopers or police, came to get him, and rather than surrender and be arrested, he dived into the billabong and drowned. It's a kind of a tragedy, but it's a lovely folk song and folk story. And in fact, Waltzing Matilda is Australia's unofficial national anthem. All Australians know that. For those in my American audience, so yeah. Waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang and he watched and waited till his billy boiled. Who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me? And waltzing Matilda simply means carrying your swag. Swag was called a Matilda. Anyway, that's that coin. I love that. It's a beautiful coin. Last but not least, the most famous, The Man from Snowy River. Now, the poem itself actually has 13 stanzas. And I do recall an old bloke at the RSL when I was young reciting the entire thing word from word. And I thought, wow, what a memory. I definitely couldn't do it. And The Man from Snowy River, of course, is a poem about the story of a horseback pursuit to recapture the colt of a prize-winning racehorse that escaped from its paddock and was living with the Brumbies, or wild horses, or Mustangs for the USA people, in the high Alps of the Victorian mountain ranges. Eventually, in the pursuit, the Brumbies descend a seemingly impassable steep slope, at which point the very experienced stockmen give up, except a young bloke, the man from Snowy River himself, spurs his smaller horse down that terrible slope and catches the mob, including the valuable colt. So you can see the picture of the wild horses at the bottom there, and the man from Snowy River cracking a whip to get his horse chasing him down the slope, and the other guys giving up at the back there. And beautiful coin. And this one again has a Jodie Clark effigy of the Queen. So let me recite you the first stanza of the 13 to give you the sense of the evocative nature of his writing and why we love it so much. There was movement at the station, for the word had passed around that the colt from Old Regret had got away and had joined the wild bush horses. He was worth £1,000. So all the cracks had gathered to the fray. All the tried and noted riders from the stations near and far had mustered at the homestead overnight. For the bushmen love hard riding where the wild bush horses are, and the stock horse snuffs the battle with delight. So that's just the first stanza of a 13 stanza poem, and it's truly an evocative Australian piece of writing. All right, well, if you enjoy that kind of content, please remember to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments perhaps which of those is your favourite, if you have a favourite poem of them all. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you later.